what if nobody ever heard the prophecy? Hey brother! What if nobody ever heard the prophecy about the Chosen One in Harry Potter? Typically, this event is what sets in motion basically the entire plot of Harry Potter and is almost self-fulfilling in a way. As a refresher though, Dumbledore is offering a polite interview to Isybelle Trelawny for the post of divination at Hogwarts, even though he doesn't really approve of the subject at all. But then, during the interview, she slips into a trance and makes a real, true, genuine prophecy. The prophecy that the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. She outlines how the boy will be identified and that Voldemort himself will mark the boy as his equal. And this all would have been like super useful information to Dumbledore to privately know if he was the only one to hear it, but of course Snape was spying at the time and overhears the first half. Snape then runs to tell Voldemort, who then acts as fast as he can on the information, almost as if he'd been waiting to hear something just like this. And it takes some doing, but eventually Peter, Wormtail, tells him the Potter's location, and then he breaks in, kills the Potters, fails to kill Harry, but instead marks him as his equal and the Chosen One, who will ultimately go on to defeat him. But do you see what I mean by self-fulfilling? Like, it's not as if Voldemort was always going to attack Harry. It's because the prophecy has made it all that he goes about trying to kill him. So, no prophecy, no killing of Harry, and no Chosen One, and Voldemort just wins, right? Well, that was the question posed to us over on Through the Gryffindor recently by listener Anton Larson. What if Dumbledore had finished the interview, left ahead of Trelawney, and then she had made the prophecy to an empty room? Like, if nobody heard it, would it still come true? Today, we find out. Hey, brother! Okay, so what if nobody heard Trelawney give the prophecy? Does anybody need to hear it for it to come true? Does every prophecy made come true? Well, that we actually do have the answer to. Dumbledore just gives it to us in Half-Blood Prince. If Voldemort had never heard the prophecy, would it have been fulfilled? Would it have meant anything? Of course not. Do you think every prophecy in the Hall of Prophecy has been fulfilled? Okay, so first of all, no, just the act of a prophecy existing does not mean it will come to pass. It doesn't mean that it won't come true, just that it doesn't have to. It's very possible that seers have made prophecies that nobody ever heard that also came true without anyone ever being the wiser. But Dumbledore's use of the word fulfilled is also interesting because it almost sounds like it needs to be heard in order to be carried out. But then that presents a kind of paradoxical reasoning because, as we just mentioned, how could you know if it didn't get carried out if you'd never heard it? But either way, it doesn't matter to Dumbledore, who seems to firmly believe that this particular prophecy would not have come to pass if Voldemort had never heard it. And I have to say it's hard not to agree with him because it's Voldemort's knowledge of the prophecy that prompts him to act at all, so if he doesn't hear it, then he won't really have reason to attack Harry or mark him as his equal, as the prophecy says he will do. So then is that it? Does that answer the entire question? Harry is not attacked, so Voldemort never falls and just continues his reign of terror from the First Wizarding War and wins? No, because as I'm sure you can tell, we have a lot more video left. That is not the end of the story, because even if nobody is there to hear the prophecy, that's not the end of that prophecy's story. Because those words won't just, fade into the ether. Instead, and rather mysteriously, I might add, a record of that prophecy will appear in the Hall of Prophecy. And just a side note here, I would love to know the history of the Department of Mysteries because, according to the author, the veil has been there as long as the ministry itself, which is an odd quote, suggesting perhaps that the ministry built itself where it is specifically because of the location of the veil. But then, how are they even capturing the prophecies? Does this record keeping just, naturally occur out in nature? Because if so, it seems pretty interesting to me that the records happen to appear so, physically close to the veil. still, unless the locations behind the doors are not like physically close, they're more like portals to different locations. I mean, one of them does lead to, space, but then not real space, just like experimental space. But then where does space begin? Let's talk about
Albert Einstein would say.
We're getting off topic. The Department of Mysteries, seriously strange place, but also not really relevant. The point is, when a prophecy is made, a record will appear in the Hall of Prophecy along with the label detailing the date of the prophecy, who made it, who they made it to, and whom the prophecy is about. So for Harry's prophecy, it says, 1980, Sybil Trelawny to Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore about Dark Lord and ? Harry Potter?
Just Harry.
And what's crazy is that the labels themselves must be magically generated and updated themselves, since the only people that can pick up the prophecies are the people to whom they are about, meaning nobody else could have heard it to make the label. So again, going back to this one, in that case, the Dark Lord is clearly named in the prophecy, while the one with the power to defeat him is left vague, hence the question mark next to Harry, which also then makes you wonder, could Neville have picked up the prophecy? He was there too, what do you think?
Why is it always me?
And y'all, now we take a quick pause right there to say thank you to today's sponsor, BetterHelp. We are living during what are, at bare minimum, some unusual times. Sometimes it can feel like things are changing at breakneck speeds, and it can be hard to keep up. But I'm also glad that we as a collective have embraced the importance of mental health and lowered stigmas around therapy. But that doesn't always mean that therapy can't sometimes feel like a luxury, which is the next barrier we need to work on. Because therapy should absolutely feel accessible, and BetterHelp can not only save you financially, but online therapy can also give you access to specialists specific to your needs that may not be available in your hometown. And just speaking from experience, therapy has been massive in my day-to-day life. Things like just taking more time for yourself may seem obvious, but working out the strategies on how to communicate those needs to loved ones can go a long way. And your well-being is worth it. So visit betterhelp.com/super to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/super. Link is in the description down below. The fact that the record is made is of vital importance to this particular what if, because regardless of Dumbledore or anyone else hearing the prophecy, that orb would still appear down there, clearly labeled with Dark Lord, although I think initially the second name would just be a question mark and then only updated after Harry or Neville was attacked as a baby. But okay, so then if no one hears the prophecy and he doesn't go attack Harry, then what? He just continues on his regularly scheduled path of destruction? I mean, I suspect without, attacking Harry and blasting himself to smithereens, he probably would have won the First Wizarding War, right? Or maybe just at least come a lot closer to winning? I mean, on his second try, he completely takes over the Ministry in just over 2 years, and that's starting over. But in the First Wizarding War, he would have had a lot more momentum, and I suspect was mere months away from taking over the Ministry anyway, which is where one very important quote from Dumbledore comes into play. Have you any idea how much tyrants fear the people they oppress? All of them realize that one day, amongst their many victims, there is sure to be one who rises against them and strikes back. Voldemort is no different. Always he was on the lookout for the one who would challenge him. He heard the prophecy, and he leapt into action, with the result that he not only handpicked the man most likely to finish him, he handed him uniquely deadly weapons. Always on the lookout. When Snape initially tells Voldemort the prophecy, he acts so quickly because he is already afraid of this, petrified of it. And so he seizes the opportunity to claim victory before the one with the power to challenge him has a chance to grow up. That fear existed in him regardless of the prophecy. He didn't hear the prophecy and then become afraid. He was already afraid, meaning that if he seized control of the ministry the first time around, there is no doubt in my mind that he would venture down to the Hall of Prophecy to try and hear as many prophecies about himself as possible to best protect himself from any incoming threat, perhaps even looking for this exact bit of information. Because don't forget how obsessed he was with the idea of the prophecy in the main story. He literally halts almost all of his other plans for a year trying to manipulate Harry into retrieving it for him, and then dwells on the door at the end of the hallway endlessly every single night. Of course, in this situation, it's no problem at all. He would just control the ministry. He can waltz in whenever he wants, pick it up, listen to it, and hear the full extent of the prophecy, which he normally does not have. And according to Dumbledore, the key bit of information that Voldemort is missing the first time is, "And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. Consequently, he could not warn his master that to attack you would be to risk transferring power to you, again marking you as his equal. So Voldemort never knew that there might be danger in attacking you, that it might be wise to wait or to learn more. He did not know that you would have power the Dark Lord knows not." Voldemort could also use the date to figure out which of the boys were born at the end of July in the year in question, but I don't think too many years, if even one, could have passed before that happens, but more on that in a minute, stay tuned. Because really, the first question we have to address is, would Voldemort actually heed the prophecy's warning and not attack Harry, fearing the power he knew not? And the answer is a definite no. Voldemort's arrogance is absolute. And he simply does not believe there is a power he knows not, or possibly worse, he just openly dismisses love as a powerful thing at all. "I have experimented. I have pushed the boundaries of magic further, perhaps than they have ever been pushed. Of some kinds of magic, of some, of others, you remain, forgive me, woefully ignorant. The old argument, but nothing I have seen in the world has supported your famous pronouncements that love is more powerful than my kind of magic, Dumbledore." I think he's actually just regular Tom Riddle when he's having that conversation, but the Voldemort voice is just way more fun. He said softly, "The old argument!" 1,000,000%, regardless of the warning, Voldemort's gonna try and attack Harry. And there's actually more to go on than just my personal hunch on that too, but before we get to that, let's also ask, if he does attack him, will he successfully kill him? Because the circumstances are different. Normally, Snape is the one to overhear the prophecy, and after learning that Lily is the target, pleads with Voldemort to spare her, which then prompts Voldemort to offer Lily the option to step aside, which she doesn't, thus casting sacrificial protection. But Snape will not know this time. Voldemort will know the information privately and act alone, as he always does. He preferred to operate alone. The adult Voldemort is the same. You will hear many of his Death Eaters claiming that they are in his confidence, that they alone are close to him, even understand him. They are deluded. Lord Voldemort has never had a friend, nor do I believe that he has ever wanted one. The Potters wouldn't even be in hiding this time because not even Dumbledore would know the prophecy, so would Harry survive? Does Voldemort offer either Lily or James the chance to live? Well, Destiny says yes. Voldemort is destined to fall, and if he's going to attack Harry, he will mark him as his equal. Although, interesting caveat, I actually think in this scenario, it would be much more likely for James to be offered the chance to live.
Nice one, James!
Because at that point, Voldemort would have, completely taken over, and the pure blood propaganda would be loud. And Lily, as a Muggleborn, would just be a goner. But James, as a pureblood, could be offered the chance to step aside and join forces, which obviously he wouldn't do. And Voldemort would get blasted by his own spell as usual because James would choose to die. time-wise, I suspect this would all happen in roughly the same time frame, maybe a little later, but definitely while Harry is like still very young, definitely still like under 2 years old. Because Trelawny's prophecy is actually not the only bit of divine fortune-telling at play here. There are also the cosmos themselves. Space.
There's plenty of space out in space.
Real space, not that experimental stuff they had down at the Department of Mysteries. Ferenzi tells his class, in the past decade, the indications have been that wizardkind is living through nothing more than a brief calm between two wars. Mars, bringer of battle, shines brightly above us, suggesting that the fight must break out again soon. Yeah, we've heard! There you go. According to the centaurs and the way they divine meaning from the stars, the brief calm was inevitable because, like, let me tell you something about space. Stuff doesn't move around up there at, like, total random. The stars were always going to align to look like that, meaning the calm was always going to be foretold and interpreted. Does that make sense? But that means Voldemort was always going to fall and then come back later. In fact, despite the vagueness of space, I dare say the centaurs have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen as well, down to Voldemort will kill Harry in the forest and Hagrid will be there. That is why Bane is so mad at Ferenzi back in book 1 for scaring Voldemort away from killing Harry, because the centaurs are not supposed to interfere with what the stars say. But by their own admission, exact times can be like pretty foggy. If you get it off by 6 years, that's like less than a rounding error to them. Because it turns out, though, that that exact scenario returns in Deathly Hallows 6 years later, where Voldemort does kill Harry in the woods with Hagrid present. The chapter is even called The Forest Again. And yes, I know Harry has been into the forest many, many times, but the again in this chapter title is a direct reference to Harry's first meeting with Voldemort in the woods back in Philosopher's Stone. And like, remember how Hagrid yells at the centaurs as Voldemort is marching back to Hogwarts? Bane! Happy now, are ya, that you didn't fight, you cowardly bunch of nags? Are you happy Harry Potter's dead? They didn't fight because doing so would have interfered with the stars, just like how they were mad at Ferenzi the first time. But now that what the stars said have passed, Voldemort killed Harry in the woods, they are free to do whatever they want, and indeed, they do join the battle when the fighting commences. So, ipso facto, even if nobody ever heard the prophecy, it doesn't matter. Voldemort would still get to it eventually, still attack Harry, still fall. Wizardkind would always enjoy a brief calm before Voldemort returned, killed Harry in the forest, and then the war would end. Probably by Voldemort dying, but I guess you could leave that open to interpretation. He's lost it pretty handily by the end, but in this scenario, maybe things would have gone a little different. I don't know. I'm pretty sure Harry's gonna win though. Boom. Guys, thanks as always for watching today's video. Don't forget to leave a like on it if you haven't already, and subscribe so you don't miss any future Harry Potter what if action from us. If you would like to see what if Neville was the chosen one, this one I thought came out really interestingly. That video is right over there. But otherwise, Ben, until next time, I will see you in another life, brother.